and and now we are seeing these chatbots and chat GPT and new ways of doing things. And there are people jumping on the bandwagon, and there are people skeptical. A healthy mixture of both kinds of people.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting to see the bubble, right? There's always an amazing amount of interest in these things. They come initially. Um, what do you see as the value of these AI tools for us as business people in the next 2 or 3 years?
Yeah. So, like many of others, I have been trying to figure that out myself. And the way I do this is trying it out myself, right?
Okay,
Of course, I had role on the team at JP Morgan Chase, which was trying to do it for the bank.
right.
And many of those things I cannot talk about. But I'll share with you how I'm experimenting it in my personal life.
Sure.
So, for example, for the last few months, I've been doing LinkedIn posts about various articles I read and various thoughts I have, various ideas I have. And with most of my LinkedIn posts, I like to include a picture.
Right.
And the old way of doing things was that you either draw your own graphic or you script it from the web. But as you know, ChatGPT can generate images
Sure.
and can generate images to your spec. And so every time I do a LinkedIn post, I go to ChatGPT and I try to give it to me the image that will capture the essence of what I'm writing in my post. And it's interesting that in many times it gets very close or very accurate. So, for example, I asked it to generate a image for, in a post in which I was talking about common sense,
Okay.
and then it gave me a post, gave me an image in which a lot of people were standing on the street, and some people had their shoes on their heads.
Yeah.
And first, I was kind of surprised that what the heck is this? And then I asked it to explain, can you tell me why does this image capture what I'm trying to say? And then it explained that, hey, it's common sense that you don't wear your shoes on your head. And in this picture, there are people wearing shoes on their head. And I thought it was pretty funny. I mean, probably, I wouldn't have come up with those pictures. Maybe no human would have come up with those pictures. But I still thought it was pretty cool, and I included it in my post. Right. So to just step back, one place where these new tools are helping us is in creative work, and generating ideas, brainstorming, and coming up with things that we may initially feel stuck, but if we ask this tool to generate something, we look at it, we either take it as it is, as it was in the case of the picture, and in other cases, it gives me ideas and then it gives me place to go. I don't take what it gives me, but it sort of gets me going. It gets my juices flowing, and then I can create something better on my own.
Yeah, and something different than you would have on your own, like you just described.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's a creative thought companion. You can think of it that way.
Yeah. And I mean, you have a lot of experience with software writing, so I'm curious to know kind of what your process is for prompt writing, and how you break down a prompt for even for something as simple as an image.
Yeah. So the being in the industry for some time has both benefits and downsides. One of the things, you know, one of the downsides is you tend to get a little bit cynical about certain things, and
Right.
and I'll first share my cynicism with you about prompts, and then I'll answer your question. And so,
Sure.
in the old-fashioned AI, we used to build these knowledge bases. They were very carefully hand-built, curated representations against which we could pose questions. And when we were posing questions, there used to be this role called question formulation engineer. Okay? And the goal of
Okay.
that person was to write the question and get the answers out of this AI system. And why such a person was needed was that this person needed to understand the schema or the structure of the knowledge base so that they can pose the query appropriately. Okay?
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that role still exists. For databases we have query writers, etc. Um, and but in the context of AI and AI research, people were criticizing that kind of role by saying um, that this question formulation engineer is adding knowledge into the query, and and the answer is
Sure.
not being an answer is not coming from your AI system, but it's coming from the knowledge that you put in the query. Right?
Right.
And so when I look at these prompt engineering and prompt based approaches, the cynic in me is like, oh, this is just question formulation engineer under a new name, right? So we
Right.
are kind
Yeah.
of putting things in these prompts, and at least in the old days, the question formulation engineer had some skill or knowledge, like they needed to understand what is in the system. And in these new
Yep.
systems, we don't even understand what is in these systems, right? And then we are supposed to
Right.
write these prompts to get them to do certain things. I mean, how is that even a useful or productive thing to do? But anyway, so let's put that cynicism aside. But
Okay.
from a sort of more practical point of view, I when I write prompts, I start off very simple, right? I just ask it to. So, for example, for my LinkedIn posts, sometimes I just give it my LinkedIn post and say, hey, can you? Here's what I'm trying to say. Can you illustrate it using a picture? Okay. And sometimes it works fine, and sometimes it's way off base. And so in that case, what I would do is from my LinkedIn post, I would pick one or two salient ideas that I want the picture to capture. And then I'll rewrite my prompt to say that, hey, can you illustrate this idea? And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't work. And then what I do is I would pose it a question in straight English. I'll say, hey, can you answer this question? And then it'll come up with the answer. And then I'll say, hey, can you turn this answer into an image now? Right. And then
Oh,
it
interesting.
works
Yeah.
very well. I mean, it just, turns the answer into a visual format. Um, so I would say I wouldn't consider it as a hard science. I mean, maybe, there are certain repeatable patterns, but for the kind of creative work I use it for,
Yeah.
at least I haven't reduced it to a science. I approach it kind of like a software engineering or knowledge engineering task. Like even when you're writing the software engineering spec, what you do is you first write very high level idea or spec, and then you sort of drill it down, and then you further iteratively refine it, right?
Sure.
So I just use that methodology to instruct it to do things that I want done, and that skill, I would say, that is common to most software engineers and coders. Anybody who has gone through any kind of CS training or computational thinking kind of training is able to do that kind of specification. So I hope that gives you some insight into.
Yeah, but well, yeah. So, for those of us who haven't been in the creative world, what's one or two things that we should think about when we're sitting down in front of one of these LLMs to start our prompt
Yeah, so I think
to
yeah,
get
so I
a
think
real
the
output?
general
Yeah.
skill which I have argued that everybody should learn is computational thinking. And what is computational thinking? right? It's a way of thinking that lets you reduce a problem to a piece of code. And in this case, we are not reducing it to code per se; we are reducing it to a prompt.
Yeah.
But but the basic idea is, well, you have a problem to solve. You start at the high level, and then you break it down into steps, series of steps, and then each step is more detailed than the top level step, and then you keep doing it iteratively, right? So I
Yeah.
mean that's the basic idea. I mean, I want to cook a meal. Well, must chop the vegetables. I must put the pot on the fire, and then I should put some oil in it, and then I should cook it for a certain time, and then I should check. You get the idea. And writing a program is
Sure.
not very different, and you can transplant this kind of thinking to prompt writing. That you start from something very high level, you break it down into simpler pieces. Except that in the case of prompt writing, sometimes instead of if your structured top down approach is not working, you just have to throw it away and start over. Maybe you have to pick just one step instead of getting it to do the whole thing. You just get it to do one step or one particular aspect of it,
Yeah.
that it is able to understand and able to execute on.
That where, for instance, if it was you say, and then input that research in, and then of it, and then take that and then write another prompt, and then the next step would be then to do the formatting for the blog post, for instance. And so not trying to get everything, not trying to eat the elephant all in one bite, but to take bits and pieces of it.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful adaptation of what I was saying to the task of writing, right? Which is inherently a creative act. And obviously, you do some research, you refer to some sources, you pull out pieces, you stitch an outline, and then you critique that outline, you refine that outline, then you embellish that outline with some pictures,
Yeah.
and then eventually probably you want to typeset it, format it,
Yep.
all these steps, right? And it would be difficult to get this tool to, or you probably shouldn't even try to do it, to ask it to just, give me a very polished blog post on this topic.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
It's too big of an ask.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really excited about this idea of the AI agents or the automations that we can create. And I'm interested to get your sense of where we are kind of on the timeline between, uh, an LLM by itself and, say, a full blown marketing department that one person can run. Or
Yeah. So, in preparation for this podcast, I went to one of my old papers. It is 15 plus years ago. Um, this was on a project funded by Department of Defense, DARPA, called Kalo, which was a precursor to Apple's Siri.
Okay.
Okay, and we were trying to solve the same problems, right? Like that, what can we automate? And and in that program, the single vision was to create an intelligent agent or intelligent assistant.
Yeah.
And we had different kind of personas and use cases. One of them was task assistance. The other one was meeting assistance. Um, and I can send you a copy of that paper. And we had examples, worked out examples of what kind of task assistance would be provided and what kind of meeting assistance you could provide. And for today's discussion, I thought maybe we could take the example of task assistance and meeting assistance and take concrete examples
Sure. Love it. Yeah.
of, of what could be done. So in that previous paper, we had an example that, suppose I want to buy scanner. Okay, I want to be able to tell my assistant, hey, can you give me a list of vendors who sell scanners? can you get me the quotes?
Right.
And from these three or four different quotes, can you go search online and give me a summary of the positive reviews and the negative reviews?
Right.
And then can you get me the previously filled out purchase orders for acquiring these scanners? Okay.
Right.
So, and again, we were trying to do this many years ago, and this is sort of pre-Siri, and one of the difficulty and challenges was that you had to go to these different places to get the information,
Right.
and each of these places had their own different APIs, and you had to um, understand what the APIs are. You have to engineer your code so that you could ask those APIs to give you information, and that was a huge engineering challenge. And I think the basic idea of uh, how you would actually write that workflow, that wasn't too hard, but then actually doing the necessary software engineering, that was very difficult.
Yeah.
And
15 years ago, for sure.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and that's why I think when CD was spun off and then Apple bought it, it kept getting watered down and down and down.
Right.
I mean, if you ask Siri to help you buy a scanner today, it can't do it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but now, fast forward, let's look at what's happening these days, and um, that problem still exists. And in fact, a version of that problem I had to solve um, a few days ago. I had to replace thermostat in my home, and I had to research, which brand I should get. Should I get a touch screen? Should I get Wi-Fi? Should I, what brand I should do? And I picked up Honeywell, and then in Honeywell there were three or four different choices, and I had to understand what the differences were between them. And I did good bit of that research using ChatGPT, and I could have done it using Google, but it I think ChatGPT was certainly much better in sort of giving me comparisons of different models and what each model could do, etc. Um, but still, even today, there is no single tool that could actually do that purchase for me. But one thing has changed in that assuming there are three or four places I have to go to complete this research and process, instead of having to do software engineering to understand their APIs, I could send my requests in English. Right? And I think that's exactly what Chat GPT has changed, and that's the main difference I see between the modern generation of agentic workflows or agent-based systems, that we can stitch together these multiple uh, steps in a process
Right.
uh, that uh, are not based on detailed data structures, but just on natural language input output. Right? And it's still an emerging area. I don't think there are products out there, but it's very cool. And I think the main problem with the NLIO is that um, there is always the risk that it's not exactly doing what you want, right? And it's
Right.
giving you taking English and giving you English back, but the at least in the old way of doing things, when you send a function call where you know the API, you have put in the work to understand the API, and you know exactly what you're asking and what you're getting. But with English input output, that becomes a little bit more challenging. And but I think there are various circumscribed ways of defining these problems that you can still do English IO, but still make sure that it is giving you exactly what you want. And I think that's kind of what the industry is trying to figure out these days. Right? Can they engineer natural language IO based systems in a way that they are reliable and they do exactly what we want.
And can they water the programming down enough so that people who are not programmers can do these no code processes and still get the outcomes that they want?
Yeah, so I think that's how some of this is being marketed.
Yeah.
The and I think it will take time for us to gain confidence that that's actually working. Because I think the engineer in me says that, well, even if I um, give it English command and I get code, I want to look at the code and make
Of
sure that
course.
it's
Yeah.
correct,
Yeah.
right? So, and if I have to look at the code to make sure it is correct, then the no code advertisement is kind of not strictly true, right? So you still have to look at the code and make sure that it is correct. But my hope is that with time we will figure out how to kind of put the right guardrails and how to kind of circumscribe these kind of interfaces so that we can be confident that when we are typing in the English, we're getting exactly what the English says.
I mean, I don't know that we'll ever get out of having to have human in the loop. Do you think we'll
Well, so it's always difficult to predict the future, right? But let me just go to the second use case I was going to talk to you about. And at least in the old days, 15 years ago, we were calling it meeting assistance. That you go to a meeting and you have this assistant with you, which will help you do things. And the obvious things are um, taking notes during the meeting
sure.
and then creating a summary of the meeting and then being able to answer questions about the meeting. Who said this during the meeting? Who replied this question that
Right.
was asked by Joe halfway in the meeting? Right?
Sure.
So those were the sorts of things we were trying to do, and many of those things we are able to do now because the meeting transcription services, they seem to be working very well.
Absolutely.
Very effective.
Yeah.
And then the meeting summarization, that seems to be quite effective. Um, then there is a question of how precise can be your answers that you ask against that summary or the questions. But I think those seem to be working quite well as well. So I think we are at a point where at least when I was at JP Morgan, we were trying to deploy a system like that into production. That you go to a Zoom meeting, at the end of the Zoom meeting, it emails you a summary of what was discussed.
Right. A tool like
And,
Otter, like that. Right.
right, right. And I think those things, like, I don't think. Uh, I mean, again, I shouldn't say that they are fully automated because if you were at the meeting and you get a summary, you will read it, and if there's any factual error, you would know. So, like, you are still human in the loop per se,
Yeah.
right? Um, but, yeah, but again, I think you probably shouldn't be building an agent which um, takes the summary of the meeting and based on that issues a purchase order, and based on that spends $1 million, right? Or some huge amount of side effect causing action. You won't want.
Sure. So yeah, for the time being, we're going to have to be in the middle and validating the outputs from the software. I'm hearing you.
Right.
Well, what about this idea that I can task an AI agent to go and scrape the web and find me some ideal clients, and then write an email and start a conversation? Are we in a spot where that's a rational expectation?
Well, so I mean, I think I have not thought specifically about that problem, but if I like to think about this on the spot with you.
Sure. Yeah.
You are in marketing and you're probably thinking about this. Um, I feel that it it can work. It just to, as a concrete example, I have gone to ChatGPT several times and said, "Hey, I'm looking for expertise on this topic. Can you tell me who are the people? Who should I be
Yeah.
looking at?" And let me see if I can tell you about the exact use case I had. Um, yeah, so here's the use case I had. I was looking for somebody to help me with writing. Okay, and I clearly used ChatGPT to critique my writing, but so I
Yeah.
had two choices. I had a choice that I should find somebody um, who is an expert on my topic, and then have them kind of read my writing and give me feedback, or I could find somebody who is um, very generic. Who's just like a copy editor, or
Yeah.
and okay, and I asked ChatGPT, okay, can you tell me which way I should go? And it gave me a pretty nice comparison. And then I said, can you find me people who can offer me these services,
Yeah.
right? And it
Right.
gave me a list of people, or list of websites which I could follow up on. So that's not exactly,
Sure.
you're looking for a new client, but again, it's very similar that you're looking for people with certain expertise or with certain profile, yeah, and you're asking it to do this for you, and it did go to multiple websites. It did read whatever they had to offer, and it gave me very nice summary. So it really was more efficient than me sitting on Google search and doing it one by one. And I should say that even after I got the results from it, I went back to Google and try to validate and verify things myself. But clearly, if I can see that kind of thing working if you're looking for clients of certain kind, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, it won't be perfect. And I should still say that um, ultimately, the human connection is still equally powerful. Like you and I met through human connection. You didn't find me through
Absolutely.
Google search or through ChatGPT. We know somebody in common, and that person uh, thought it was a good idea for us to connect, right? So in the same way,
Right.
yeah, sure, these web search tools could help you find some names of clients, but the human network, I think, is still very powerful. I'm not sure if these tools are going to be, well, I should say they can be complementary to what we can do using human connections, right? They'll probably look at things that humans won't. So in that sense, it kind of uh, enhances and expands that humans can do on their own.
Idea. I love that's a great example of generative engine optimization, right? That these editors had content put together in a way that the generative engines could find them. But I
Right.
agree. Ultimately, it's the human connection is still trumps whatever is going to
Right.
come from the internet. I agree with you. Well, I guess the final question I have for you is just how somebody like me who's not a software engineer should continue to test and pay attention and stay on top of these AI tools to get the most value from them in my day-to-day operations as a marketing professional.
Right. Well, I think the first thing is to just be open minded and just trying things out, and in that sense, you and I are no different. I signed up for ChatGPT, I signed up for Gemini, I signed up for a few other tools, and just try things at it. Not being sort of critical or judgmental that, oh, they can never do better than I, or they can never do better than humans. Just trying them out and seeing. seeing where can they add value, and in the context of, okay, what are the things I'm struggling with, where do I need help, and can I go to these tools and can they help solve me some of my problems. And that, I think, is just a very immediate and no friction and easy stepping stone. um, there is obviously a longer term way of thinking about it, and this is something, I got from one of my colleagues at JP Morgan. And I we were on sort of a coffee or social kind of break, and I asked him, um, why is your group investing so much effort into figuring out how you are going to leverage these tools, and is it
Right.
really helping you in your day-to-day business now? How do you justify its business impact? And his answer was interesting. He said, I don't care about the immediate business impact, because these tools are going to rewire and rechange the way the business is done. That if we keep learning them and we keep uh, trying to figure out how we can reconfigure our business around their capabilities, we are going to turn out to be ahead than most other people. So that I thought was pretty cool. That sure, you want to ask the question that what is in it for me today?
Sure.
How is it useful for me today? But then there is also the longer term strategic thinking that how would I rethink my business? What new things I could do that I had not imagined before using
Yeah.
this tool. So both, I think, have to go hand in hand, and I think this good balance between the two is, I think, where you want to be.
Yeah, I like that, and I like what you said earlier, which is you said, "Well, let's figure out what the problem is or what you needed to do, right, and then work around a very concrete solution, so it's additive and getting the value of it, right."
Mhm.
And for instance, I have a client that is a regional health club, and they have people who owe them money that are longer than 60 days they haven't paid. So we set up the AI voice caller that makes the phone calls to the people who owe money, and that's something that the people don't like to do. Their staff don't like to do those activities. So it's a perfect application, and every month it makes the money from instituting this one very small application, and it's additive in that it frees up the people to go and be people rather than trying to be a bill collector.
Yeah, I mean that's actually an amazingly fantastic example, because, as you said, as a person, I don't want to have an awkward conversation,
Right.
and but on the other hand, the person who is receiving the call, I also don't want to be receiving the robocalls.
Right.
But unless I
Right.
pay, I will keep receiving those robocalls because I'm not paying. So I may just pay just to get robot off my
Right.
back.
Yeah. Well, Vinay, I truly your time in the conversation. I'm interested to know what one or two of your it might give us a little insight into what's going
Yeah.
on for you right
So
now.
I am working these days on exploring the possibility of setting up a new AI institute, which
Mm,
can leverage explicit knowledge. And let me explain what that means. Um, the way these current generation of large language models work is you feed it lots and lots of data, could be text, video,
right.
images, and then it learns from it, and then you pose it a question, and out comes the response. And the way that response is coming is it has some internal network which has a set of weights, and it fires some calculations, and it produces a response, which from a research
Yep.
or mathematical point of view we like to call a prediction. Okay, so for example, um, you could do 3 plus, you could ask, you could give it a prompt 3 plus 3, it will give you 6. It's not exactly adding 3 and 3, it is just predicting that the sum of 3 and 3 is likely to be 6 because that's what I've seen in my data. Okay. But you and I know that it is important for us to have programs where we can actually add 3 plus 3. We know for sure that we are
Right.
adding 3 plus 3, and we are not just predicting, we're not guessing, we are actually adding.
We want a
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's that kind of AI, which we used to do many years ago. Um, uh, but I think in the new context, I think we need a new approach, and maybe for doing this kind of explicit knowledge and explicit calculation, there is a way for us to leverage these large language models so that we can benefit from their automatic nature. We can benefit from their ability to deal with language, ability to absorb noises, but at the same time, help us do actual precise calculations more cheaply,
right.
more economically. So I think that's sort of what this new institute is aimed at. We are doing a workshop at the National AI Conference in March, and
Nice.
bringing in about 30 to 50 leading AI thinkers to help us define what the charter of this institute should be, and then actually go after creating it. Hopefully, take AI to the
That
next level.
sounds amazing. Like you're out of the AI, right? That's
Right.
what that's the image that I get from that. Giving it more tools and develop answers from.
Yep.
I love it. Well, it's good. How would people get in touch with you if they wanted to?
Yeah. So I don't know how you advertise or how you're posting your podcast, but I I can give you my contact. You have my contact, so you can put my email address on the podcast. I'm on LinkedIn. People can message me on LinkedIn. Right. And yeah.
All right. Well, I'm very
All
grateful for
right.
your time.
Thanks, Emmanuel.
Thank you
It
so
was
much.
a delightful conversation. Thank you so much for reaching out, and let's hope we can stay in touch.
On again and hear more about your
Okay.
institute.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.